For more on what's next for the two Koreas, I spoke to Troy Stangarone. He is the Senior Director of Congressional Affairs and Trade at the Korea Economic Institute. We began with the significance of reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex.
I've actually been to the Kaesong Industrial Complex twice and the city of Kaesong once. It's this unique idea they had of trying to take and sort of slowly change North Korea by bringing South Korean know-how and capital to the north, and then using that to sort of teach them how to take and learn about market capitalism and everything. And it's interesting. I went there when the complex had only been open about a year or maybe less, and so it's all new facilities, very sort of modern for the time. Now it's about a decade old. But it was this unique idea. But the downside to it, and this is why it's closed now, was there were concerns that the regime was either using this money directly to fund the nuclear program, or indirectly it was allowing them to take and divert funds that they would otherwise have to use to the nuclear program.
So before Kaesong closed, what kind of money was it bringing in for the North Koreans?
Yeah. So the South Korean government estimate is that it was about 110 million is what they earned in its last year of operations. Depending on exchange rate, it's probably somewhere around there, maybe up to 120, but that's pretty much the range of where they were earning, or what they were earning off of that.
Would you say that that was a significant economic contributor for the DPRK's economy at the time?
While it's important, especially for a country that doesn't have much, it wasn't necessarily their most significant source of income.
So the reopening of these types of special economic zone and the tour company, is that more symbolic, or is that economically significant to these two economies?
So I think, especially with Kaesong, there's a lot of symbolism there. There was a lot of concern when it was closed. In some ways, the Kaesong Industrial Complex was almost like an embassy for the two Koreas. So it had a lot of this sort of, both nationalistic and important value to the two countries. That being said, right now we're at this point to where we're trying to take and minimize North Korea's revenue sources as much as possible to try and make sure that, one, they commit to denuclearization, but two, they don't come off that path. So I think, the challenge for Kaesong is, one, and Kumgang as well, would these sort of help relieve the pressure on North Korea to a degree that, might undermine that ability? But then two, when we look at where the UN sanctions are right now, you have prohibitions on the transfer of bulk cash. North Korea required that basically everything be paid in U.S. dollars to them. We have U.S. Financial sanctions, and so it would be illegal under just U.S. sanctions for South Korea to transfer dollars to North Korea. So you have these types of issues that are going to potentially be obstacles going forward.
So that means it's not just as simple as flipping a switch back on, or even bringing the employees back. There are other things that have to fall into place, which do depend on the United States. I mean, you're saying that Kaesong can't open without the U.S. giving the green light.
And I think this is why in the statement, South Koreans and North Koreans sort of acknowledge this reality when they said when conditions are ripe. And so, what I think they're referring to here is that once we're far enough along the denuclearization path, then these are the kinds of things they would like to do.
Now, we talked about, too, last time they brought a couple hundred business people from South Korea to the DPRK. This time, the head of Samsung Electronics was there, or I should say the vice chairman was there, and there were some other South Korean business leaders meeting in Pyongyang. What do you make of that in terms of what kind of message that sends?
I think they're trying to send basically two messages. That one, we're not backing away from commitments we had made in the past. As you mentioned, they were before members of the business community who had come to North Korea. And so if the South didn't bring them now, it would have sent the wrong message to the North, especially when Moon Jae-in and President Trump are offering the prospect of economic engagement and much more growth in the future. But at the same time, I think, having somebody like Lee Jae-young there, there's a lot of talk in South Korea now that, maybe ICT might be one area of importance in the future for North Korea, to show them, we have done these great things in these industries. In the future, you could too. So it's also holding out this olive branch of what the future could look like.
A lot of people had a lot of analysis about the recent parade, that there weren't major ICBMs, nuclear warheads, but there was a lot of emphasis on an economic future for Pyongyang and its people. Is there a sense that you have that we really are in a new era in some way, in terms of the DPRK focusing its national interest more around a national concept of economy as opposed to a national military?
I think practically speaking, we're at a point to where, even without any further tests, they've largely completed what they need to do for the nuclear program. There's probably still some technical things they need to work out, But in terms of having a nuclear deterrent, they've largely arrived. We know that they can probably reach the United States. We know that they can explode a hydrogen bomb. So they've made a lot of progress here. The one area where North Korea is truly deficient is in its economy. And I do think Kim Jong-un would like to see that change. The question really is he willing to give up the nuclear program for that economic future?